He had failed to live right without laws and restraint by punishment of civil rulers. Now he was forced to obey the right and reject the wrong by the consequence of punishment of civil rulers. We all know somebody that's not going to do right unless they're faced with the threat of punishment of jail. That's why it's so, if you really want someone to change, you must allow them to experience the consequence of their action. They will not change unless they experience the consequence of their actions. That's why we don't do, even as small children, you don't do them favors while you have the chance to mold and guide them gently and nurturingly by letting things go that you can train and nurture them on gently. The more they grow, the bigger they grow, the stronger they grow, the more energy or effort it will take to break those old habits. The example is given of, y'all remember the old folks used to say, Mother Hoseann, you remember? Y'all used to tell us, baby, you better bend that sapling while it's young. That's why. The longer you let it go, the harder it is to break. God forbid you let it go until they're between 12 and 14 when they get that second God-created burst of testosterone and estrogen. Y'all remember that's in that age range where we start saying they're smelling themselves? God did that so they could be, so that young men could begin to become bold, so that at 2 in the morning, if somebody shows up at that door with an evil intention, they will not be afraid to go offer their lives for their wives and their children. It takes boldness and courage to go do that. For a woman to develop, a young woman to begin developing the nesting instinct and the urge to care for small children, no matter what direction the world is pulling her, that second burst of estrogen begins to cause her to begin to think and talk and act sassy, because God is preparing her for motherhood. She's beginning to develop attributes that will enable her to be a good mother. That's what she's smelling. So you got to start molding them before those kinds of things take place. All right. I don't know where that came from. All right. Glory to God. Amen. The fourth dispensation is the dispensation of promise. Now, I'm gonna if I don't say anything else, for those of you who will ever raise children, it's important for you to understand that. Start training them when? In the womb. Yes. Start singing Zion songs to them. Start praying for them. Start rubbing and talking to them in the womb. Don't let anybody trick you into thinking a small child cannot be gently guided and nurtured. Do not let them do what they want to do. That doesn't mean you take a brick and hit them upside the head. You've got to break their will, not their spirit. Amen. And you do it as soon as possible. When you told that child to sit down and they got up anyway, do not let them keep getting up. Make them do what you know is best for them. And you're training them in a way that will propel them to do great things at every stage of their development. Amen. But you have to break test was for Abraham and his seed to have faith in God, to obey him, and to remain segregated from all other nations and evangelize the world. That was the test during the dispensation of promise. God's purpose was to choose one man through whom Messiah should come, to use him and his seed as his representatives in the earth, and to give them Canaan as a base of operation concerning his programs among men in the gospel and in government eternally. Now that's a lot. You don't have to write all that down. The fifth dispensation, as we move to wrap up, is the dispensation of law. It's called this because of the law given to Moses, which became part of the rule of faith and practice during the period between Moses and Christ. The test was to obey the law of Moses in every detail. God's purpose was to test Israel to see if they would obey him and to begin a commonwealth of nations headed by Israel and governed by men of his own choice, to establish a visible system of worship that would picture the coming redemptive truths in every detail, meaning the coming Christ. Everything that God set up in the worship, in the tabernacle, with the Holy of Holies, with the table of showbread, with the Ark of the Covenant, with the mercy seat, everything there, with the outer court, the court of the Gentiles, the inner court, everything pointed to the coming of Christ. Everything about the temple, about the tabernacle, pointed to the coming of Christ in one way or other. Everything. That was the fifth dispensation of law. The sixth dispensation of grace. Matthew 3:1 through Revelation 19:10. This is the present age. We're in the dispensation of grace, so called because of the fullness of grace that was brought by Jesus Christ. Notice it doesn't say the beginning of grace. Jesus Christ represents the fullness of God's grace. The test is obedience to the faith of the gospel. And God's purpose has been to save all who will believe. The seventh dispensation is the dispensation of divine government, or the millennium, also known